Welcome to Season 2 of Into the Forge, the Lemnos podcast talking with hardware entrepreneurs about the journey, tools, and lessons that shape their startup and product. In this episode, I'll be talking with Jon and Eric, the founders of Seriforge. This is an exciting episode focused on advanced manufacturing and material science, specifically around carbon fiber. Welcome, guys. Why don't we start off by you giving me your names, your company, and what are you working on?
Yeah, I'm Jon Hollander. I'm the CEO of Seriforge. We're a startup. We're automating carbon fiber for mass production.
I'm Eric Gregory, a VP of Engineering at Seriforge. I'm Jon's co-founder.
Number one, I heard the word carbon fiber. It's interesting. Talk to me. It's in my car. It looks really cool. It's got crosshatches on it. What brought you? Tell me a little bit about carbon fiber and how you got to this material. What is it you're doing?
Yeah, so carbon fiber is an amazing material. It's pretty much the strongest, lightest material that you can buy commercially available. The downside is everything that's made of it is very expensive. You think about carbon fiber bicycles, they're thousands of dollars. Carbon fiber for cars are extremely expensive, used on fighter jets, Formula One race cars. The reason everything's so expensive is because everything is basically made by hand.
Okay.
So it's an expensive material, but really the cost for the end product comes in the hand labor process that's used to make it. If you've ever had a handmade suit tailored or appreciate that process of how much skill and the craft involved in manufacturing, fine piece of clothing by hand, that's essentially the same skill set and almost the same process for making these composite carbon fiber parts by hand. And we're trying to change that. We're making an automated platform that takes customer part designs and produces repeatable, scalable, complex carbon fiber parts at mass production scales in an automated fashion.
When you're saying it's like made by hand, what does that mean?
Literally made by hand. I mean, we've all, in our lifetimes watched what can be done with metals, with CNC machining, or plastics with 3D printing. I mean, it's revolutionized how we make stuff. And once we looked at how stuff was made of carbon fiber, it's literally take pieces of fabric, cut it with scissors, paint on resin, put it in a mold, close the mold, and it's this just 19th century process.
So carbon fiber is actually like cloth or like a fabric.
Yeah, it comes in as a roll of cloth.
Yeah, I've seen bolts of it here in the building.
It's rolls of yarn.
Yeah.
It's called tow. Or bolts of cloth. Yeah.
So carbon fiber, you just said it's a wonder material. It's really light and it's really strong. And you said, but everybody has to work on it by hand. So from that note, how did you get to starting a company that was going to work on carbon fiber? What was the sort of the genesis of that, knowing only that it was maybe a wonder material? Maybe you didn't even know when you started.
I did, but my process was kind of unusual. I was actually at an art exhibition on mathematical knitting, and this mathematician, she knitted these incredible three-dimensional shapes out of yarn. Klein bottles, Mobius strips, all these really complicated three-dimensional curved manifolds. And I thought, this is amazing. Why don't they do this with practical objects? And to be honest, I thought they did. I thought that she had just reprogrammed this machine that they used to make, fighter planes or, race cars, and just reprogrammed it to make these mathematical sculptures. And I was talking to the artist, and she's like, no, I did these all by hand. And I think everything like that's made by hand, to be honest. And I didn't believe her. I didn't really know too much about the field, but so I went online and started looking for like a YouTube video of this mysterious machine that was being used to make, all these carbon fiber parts. And it didn't exist. All I found was these videos of people we know doing, laying down pieces of fabric by hand in this mold. And it wasn't just guys in a garage making a kayak. It was General Electric making jet engine fan blades by hand, 1,700 pieces of carbon fiber, 300 plus hours to make these fan blades. And I thought, this is insane. This is a 21st century material. I mean, you're literally making things that go into space. Mm-hmm. And you're doing it using the same skill set as 19th century pre-industrial revolution craftspeople. And not to denigrate the skill set, it's an amazing set of skill and craftsmanship. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world of mass-produced products that are widely available and are affordable to people. And I thought, I grew up in an aluminum foundry factory. My family had a small business, machine tools, surrounded by machine tools. I thought, where are the machine tools? Where are the machines that they use to make these composite parts? I thought this would be an interesting problem to crack. And that sort of started my journey, at least, which eventually led to a lot of research and failed prototypes. And then longer term, a genesis of an idea of a machine and process that would actually work, and started this company.
Gotcha. And Eric, how did you get involved?
Well, Jon and I got a chance to work together probably going back 10 years ago over a course of 8 years in previous companies. And when he started down this process, I kind of watched from the sidelines, was really intrigued. And I think it was in early 2014, he called me up and said, I need to show you what I'm working on. He showed me these CAD models of this machine. I said, God, does this really work? He said, yeah. I said, that's fantastic. this is something I'll leave my job over. This is great. I believe in this. And through that year, we worked on the idea together. We actually dove into the business because we really wanted to understand the market and make sure we weren't creating technology that didn't have a place. Convinced ourselves that there was a need for this. It was a real need. And by fall, just said, I need to do this. And left my job and joined Jon, and we founded the company.
So an interesting thing is the scope, like how long you've been, to bring an idea of this complexity to fruition. It sounds like you've been working on it for a few years now.
Yeah, I think I went to the art exhibition probably in 2008, maybe, and then sort of just got that bug in my head that this would be a problem to solve. And I had a full-time job, and everything else at the time was weekends, evenings, put it down for 3 months, pick it back up, that sort of thing. And that was pretty much through about 2012 or so. And then kind of took a sabbatical and pretty much went full-time working on this. And 2014 was really, by then, ripe enough to even start a company on. So yeah, it's been a long journey.
Yeah, so for the entrepreneurs out there in the audience, those advertisements you read that says from zero to product in 6 months, not every product has to do that. Some take much longer that journey just takes longer to both, initially sort of ideate and then just the build process. It's, we're working with a wonder material, but the challenge is, it sounds like, in terms of converting your idea into product. I mean, you had some big technical challenges to knock down.
There's obviously just technical complexity of building a machine that moves accurately, but I think one unique challenge is, our process handles a pliable material, right? So it's not just a machine doing a robotic thing over and over again, but you're dealing with the dynamics of something that's a little unpredictable. You're pushing thread and yarn through a fabric, and it all needs to be in the right place at the right time. So that adds some additional complexity for sure.
Well, it also sounds like you need to, like, if I want to make a part today, like I'll design it and I'll be in SolidWorks or I'll be in some program where I've designed that part. You have to integrate that because I want that part, and you have to just work with those folks. So it sounds like you have software and a machine coming together to make this happen.
I like to joke that we're doing all the engineering. We have everything from software engineering, computational geometry, mathematical modeling of surfaces, to low-level motion control software, writing servos and stepper motors and precise synchronization, complex mechanical design, complex fabrication techniques for some of our needles and other fiddly bits that actually manipulate the fiber.
Motion control.
Then on top of it, material science. I mean, this is cutting-edge material science that we're actually working with in terms of the way you use the fibers, the way you handle the fibers, the way you arrange them in the product. And then the molding, the chemistry process to actually, turn this into a finished part. I think anything but, genetic engineering, I don't do any of that, but everything else we pretty much do.
So you mentioned earlier, that you're, from a background perspective, that your family sounds like a machine shop, and you had some familiarity. I always ask this question, like, before this project, had you worked on hardware? And that can be anything from I did it commercially to at night I take apart things for fun to I have an ME degree to my family did it. Explain to me, like, on your arc to building what sounds to be a complex system, what was your exposure to hardware before this?
Well, growing up, my family it was a small aluminum foundry, so it was aluminum die casting, so giant presses and furnaces doing it, and then a machine shop and everything else. So I grew up kind of around machine tools and factory manufacturing processes, at least on the metalworking side. So I never really would go on Saturdays and help my dad, quote unquote, with projects, but it wasn't like, I was there running the presses or anything like that. But we were always just, mechanically, I guess, facile, is the way to describe it. Studied engineering in college, electrical engineering actually. I was attracted. Electrical was something I didn't know a lot about, and there was a lot of math in it, and I thought this would be fun. So that was sort of my, in terms of education, I guess. And then I always just liked building stuff on the side. And, I was probably the only first year of lawyer. I went to law school as well. Actually buy a CNC mill and just actually, be making little, widgets and things on the side just for fun.
But you actually, on your route, you studied electrical engineering, but then became a lawyer.
Yeah, that's right.
And if returned to build something even more complex that cuts across many different things.
Yeah, so actually when I got out of school, I did great in college, top of my class, but I was in the Midwest in Ohio and Rust Belt. The job market was just not great even then. And I knew it was a wider world out there and wanted to be a part of it, and knew I had to leave the Midwest to do it. And at the same time, thought going to law school would actually be sort of a route to sort of apply my engineering education in a different way, get over that horrible job market at the time. So I went to law school and became a patent lawyer, and then came to the Bay Area just to practice law, and then sort of on the sidelines watching all these great companies grow, and then eventually decided I had to throw my hat in the ring.
And you, Eric?
Yeah, like John, always a tinkerer. So I've always on my own built a lot of small things, mostly electronics. So I've tinkered a lot of, even my background formerly is software. I've always built in the hardware software realm.
Right.
So I used to build a lot of interface electronics, both analog and digital. I actually had a small startup many years ago and sold some interface products that I created. And then professionally, early in my career, I worked for some large military contractors building vehicle simulators, tank simulators, helicopter simulators, and missile training systems, and got to build big, complex, motion platforms, a lot of mechatronics. And it's been really fun coming back to that world again, and even some industrial automation a little bit, power control. So it's been fun coming back to that because everything was really hard then by comparison. You had to build the whole stack bottom to top. You could buy microcontrollers, but that meant a chip, 8080 something or other,
right?
Or F, and then you build up from there. So you had to build everything, and that really meant from concept to product was a lot longer. Now we have the building blocks where you can get going really fast, and that's a lot of what motivated me to come back and do this again. It's a lot easier now.
Gotcha. So we have this idea. You've thought about it. You've done a bunch of diligence. The transition or the window that you went through from those early ideas to the the product that was in this building. You've since moved out and continue to grow. But how did you go through that process? What was the thinking, the reduction, the MVP? How did you go from idea to that first product where like, this is what we're going to use, to build, to do X, to validate the idea? How do you go through that reduction process? And maybe it's not even reduction. I may be oversimplifying it, right? It may be we need to expand in these areas and reduce here to get to something that solves the problem.
Yeah, well, certainly it was not a linear path. It was not a, go from point A to point B and you know exactly where you're going. It's definitely more of a journey. I think a lot of it was, and I think this was one thing Lemnos really pushed us to, is just talk to the customer early and often and getting that voice of the customer in the room and learning, okay, yeah, you've got this idea for this crazy machine that does everything, but do customers really want a machine that does everything, or do they really want something that does these 5 things? And is this the right product to build to do just those 5 things, or 2 things, or 1 thing? And so it was a lot of customer engagement. It was a lot of learning what their needs are and how we can address that. I mean, we had this idea that, handmade parts are expensive. We want to automate it, but it was just what type of parts, what part of the process we automate, when we should automate one part of the process versus another part of the process, where the bottlenecks were. And that was a lot of sort of talking to people and a lot of sort of discovery. And it was definitely a little bit circuitous to get sort of our first product.
Right.
Yeah, I think John hit it right on. It was, we had these ideas of what a great machine was, had all these great features, and we thought they were all necessary to achieve the value of what we were trying to build. And it was only through, thanks to Lemnos, forcing us to talk to our customers early, that we had collected really good data about what they wanted. Now, to our discredit, we had the data, but I don't think we listened to it early enough, because it wasn't until later where we had our VP of Business Development, who was our in-house voice of the customer, that pointed that data and held and said, look, this is what your customers want, and let's build this, and help us refine. And it was reduction for the most part that let us really get to market earlier rather than build a lot of unnecessary functionality.
Sometimes you hear this fear with folks who maybe it's their first company, where they're like, well, I have an idea and I know who the customer is, but I'm afraid if I talk to the customer, they might take the idea, or they might not take me seriously because I can't show them the final thing. Did you face that fear? Did you have that? And it sounds like customers, though, were very receptive to talking with you, independent of where you were in the development cycle.
Some were. I mean, most were. There were a few that were cranky old guys who were like, these kids don't know what they're doing. Don't waste our time. But there was, for the most part, it was a lot of times, if you're talking to a customer, you're really doing mostly listening. You're asking questions and listening. So I think in terms of the fear of like letting your idea out of the bag, you don't have to tell them I have a great idea for a machine that looks like this and does these 10 different things. You can just say, I think this is a problem. You can tell me what you think. Everyone loves to complain. Everyone wants to tell you like where their pain point is, where their hurt is. All you have to do is like ask them, and most people tell you what bothers them, and you just ask them leading questions and just listen. You don't have to tell them anything.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly right. Listen.
You're building the company, and you hear a lot, as an early founder, you should go out and get advisors and mentors. You hear these words bandied around: advisors, mentors, early employees, peers, incubators, just sort of, and 1,000 voices could be talking to you. When you approach that, how did you think about who you would surround yourself with to help you go on the voyage? And how do you listen to them, and how do you process what sometimes could be conflicting information or conflicting advice? How do you look at that as a founder?
I don't know if we could extrapolate our experience to be universal. I'll just say our own, which was, fortunately we had good networks of people who turned us on to some really good leaders in the industry, each in their area, and we talked to them, and there were a few we said, oh, this person would be a great advisor, right? Whatever that means. And we met with them, and they had great advice and still give good advice. But putting a title on it and designating a role suddenly creates this exclusive relationship, and you start to cut yourself off to other opportunities. Instead, we've taken a broader approach. We just build up that network, try to just get as many good contacts and get value from all of them. I don't think I regret that in any way. We'll get to a point where if it's appropriate to designate an advisor, we'll do that. I like to think that our entire network gives us good advice, and that's kind of the approach we've taken.
And I think probably 90% of our challenges, maybe that's overstating it, but a substantial portion of our challenges as a hardware startup are just running a startup. It has nothing to do with our technology. It has nothing to do with our customers. It's just, the usual hiring people, building culture, building team, organizing, settling on a vision, getting consensus. It is, fundraising, all those things that startups have to do. And I think, I don't want to say it's universal, but it's at least within the Lemnos community, we're all in the same boat. So just having companies that are, at your stage, a little bit ahead of your stage, a little bit behind your stage, you can pay a little forward to the people, a little bit behind you, and hopefully that you don't bug the people ahead of you too much. But I think that's where a lot of the value of the network comes in. It's not so much, how do I build this mechanism to solve this problem? It's, how do I put together a team quickly? How do I make everyone happy? How do I, execute on fundraising?
It's a consistent theme we always hear from founders is sometimes it's not the technical challenge that was the most difficult thing about building the company.
Right.
Yeah. As you're going through this process, I say, what are the tools that you've used that you have found personally that have given you the most productivity improvement, have brought the sort of the best bang for the buck? And when I say tool, it could be anything from a phone to a process. Hey, we use Agile for this, or we use Asana for that. Or what tools did you guys find along the voyage that helped you and your team and your product come to fruition?
Well, just touching on process briefly, a big proponent of Agile processes, methodologies in general. I don't subscribe to any one of them. I pick and choose and develop a methodology for whatever project is at hand, and I always do that. I think that's always served me well. It continues to serve us fairly well. We had some early challenges extending that methodology out of the software realm to the hardware realm, but in the end, that turned out to be more of a cultural issue than a process issue, with a few adjustments.
Everyone likes to say waterfall and Agile get together in a room and all they do is fight each other, right? Yeah. But I'm not sure it's that simple.
It's not. It always comes down to people more than process, and if you're trying to ram a process down, that's its own problem.
Right.
But and again, the fundamental thing is if the process isn't working, fix the process. So we went through that. So overall, just short note on Agile, of course it worked. That does us well. And the tools aren't that important. Just know how to use them, know what you're trying to do. The one thing I'll touch on is there's a lot of tools available for the tactical aspects of sprints and scrums and all that. I still haven't found a replacement for Microsoft Project for the longer term view on this. I use both.
Okay.
Or we use both, I should say.
Gotcha.
John, anything more to add on that?
Tools, I think that's great. I think you mentioned attitude. I think in my mind, my biggest tool for solving problems is just an open mind and a sense of adaptability.
Totally.
That's, I'm pretty tool agnostic. I mean, we used Inventor, and then we switched over to SolidWorks. We use GDocs, but I also use Word and Office. Those really don't matter to me. I think, everyone has little nits about this software is better than that software. Yeah. But I think it just, in terms of just being adaptable and sort of, as a CEO, as a founder, you always have 10,000 problems to solve on your plate. And it's just keeping an open mind about, how to approach, solutions and triaging the things that you can take care of and wanting to push aside the things that, aren't that big of an issue right now and you'll solve later. It's just being adaptable and flexible and just keep moving forward. I think that's the biggest tool I've had, and it's helped me the most.
I think I'd build on that. I guess if that is such an important thing, and how did you think about building your teams with that in mind? You talked about both attitude and sort of agility, and I think I love it. It's got a little bit of agility. They rhyme, they work together. But taking them away from being words, how did you bring them to your team?
Well, this is going to start getting to cliche land a little bit, but it starts with our values, company values, which we had before we had a company. So John and I sat down and we had an explicit conversation about this, and we have 4 or 5. Don't ask me to recite them now, but but they're the ones you expect them to be. Collaboration, etc. But we really mean that. They're not just words on paper, and we talked at length about what it meant and how they would be reinforced and what the qualities of demonstrable qualities of people are that have these values and share these values. And it's really comes back to that.
Yeah, I think it's Valve Software, the game company up in Seattle. They had like their employee handbook posts on the internet, and one of the things they said they look for, which really I think we could look for as well, is they look for T-shaped people that have a really broad width of things they're interested in, they're into, they do. Maybe they're not an expert in it, but they have all these varied interests, technical or otherwise, and they have some depth in some area, but they're not afraid to stretch their arms and actually do things that aren't necessarily in that one pillar of the T.
Right.
And I think we really look for that when we're hiring. That really stands out. If someone's a first-rate engineer of some type, but they're not a very broad T-shaped person, at least at this stage of our company, that's not nearly as interesting to us as somebody who is a excellent, but maybe not world's best software engineer or whatever else, but a broad, adaptable T-shaped person that can put on a couple different hats and be flexible. That means a lot more to us. Yeah,
we like to see a lot of overlap in skill sets, and that promotes collaboration and team members finishing each other's sentences in a good way, and rather than silos of information where things aren't viewed holistically. I think that's really key.
Along the voyage, what has been the most surprising thing that happened to you building the product? What caught you just off guard? Was like, wow, I did not see that one coming.
I can give you a positive one.
Yeah, if you start with a positive one, I'll think about if there's a negative one.
Positive one was when we made our very first sample parts and we didn't have any in-house testing capability. We had to send it off for a customer. Our customer was going to test something before we could, and it tested really well. Because we were, frankly, amateurs in that area.
Right.
And that was a really positive surprise that, did we get lucky or... It didn't matter. I was just happy that they were happy.
I do remember you walking around with a pretty big smile on your face in that window.
A lot of things went right for us at that moment, and it felt great, better than I expected. I just didn't think that the first shot would come out good. It rarely does.
Right. Actually, I in terms of surprising thing, maybe this is more of a business thing. You talked a little bit about product, but I think in my mind, when I started this company, our product was going to be this machine. We were going to sell machines. We were going to be like a 3D printer company. But for composites or a machine tool company like Haas or DMG Mori and some of these exotic industrial hardware. And talking to customers, but also just, talking with some of our investors. And actually, when we brought on our VP of Business Development, he also really pushed us to examine this, objectively. Look at our business model and say, is selling machines really the right way to go? And you asked me that, 4 years ago, I've been absolutely, there's no way we're going to do anything other than different. And then winning the business, it's like, wow, selling parts off the machines that you make as opposed to selling the machine. Way better business model, recurring revenue, lowers barriers to entry. You don't have to convince someone to buy and invest and learn how to use this incredibly complicated machine. You just give them what they actually want, which is the parts. It's, I hate to use the term win-win, but it's a win-win, but would never have expected that in the beginning. And but I think, again, being adaptable, looking at the data, and seeing where it drives you. And it clearly made sense for us, and that's where we are, and we're really happy to be there.
Back to the word adaptable. Yeah. What's been the hardest part of being a hardware startup founder?
Hiring.
That was fast.
I can give you a list. No, I think it's everything's hard, but I like it. I like hard things. I mean, I tend to get bored if I'm not being challenged, and so I did this because it was hard. And those days when it goes all well after you've put in all the hard work, and you just feel like you're reaping the fruits of whatever little milestone you hit that day because you put in all that effort for months or sometimes years behind you. That just feels incredible. So the whole thing is hard. It's not easy, but I like it because it's hard.
Talk to me about hiring. Again, consistent thing you hear from founders, but why is it hard?
We have high standards. It goes back to with those values, and we filter for that, and we're fairly particular, and that's all well and good. But the hard part isn't that's hard finding people, but what's hard about it is setting yourself up that way means you're inevitably going to get into a situation where you haven't hit your staffing plan, and now you have candidates that you're interviewing that aren't meeting the standards you set, and you're now in that position of, do I compromise my values to hit an objective on paper?
Right.
That's hard. Meaning it's that emotionally hard thing to do, making those decisions. That's the hard part.
And I guess that leads to, the D word, discipline, I guess, at some level. And that's, when the rubber meets the road and you're you're looking at engineering schedules and you need somebody,
right.
That's where discipline really becomes, real, as opposed to this theoretical idea. What would I do if I was here? Well, now I'm here.
And back to the A word is, do you have a fallback plan?
Mm-hmm.
And we do that. We talk about, okay, if we can't get one, our A or B pick, what do we do with the C can? Do we do that, or do we fill in with contractors? Do we find that person? Do we hire that person not as a lead and say we'll hire the lead later? And it's contingencies, but it's a lot of planning and adapting.
You have the opportunity to reach out now to founders who maybe are where you were back in 2012, maybe a little earlier. They're thinking, hey, I've got this idea, but I'm not quite sure I'm the right person, or wow, I've heard it's hard. Mm-hmm. What advice would you offer to, founders who are, either coming into this for the first time, or maybe someone who's like, okay, I've done it once and boy, I'm trying to learn from everybody I can find. What would you tell them?
Make sure you're in love with your idea. You're in love with the industry. If it's sort of, I think this is kind of interesting, maybe I'll mess around with it. That's great. Go off and mess around with it. But to really, it's like that 80-20 rule, except it's more like, the last 20% takes 90% or 99% of the effort. You really have to commit to it, and you have to expect to be committed and following through. And even when it's a slog, and even when, it's like, I can't believe we're not further along, you have to commit to it. And so if you're not sure you're 100% committed to that idea or this industry or this vision, that's okay. Spend more time exploring it, but you really, before you pull the trigger and say, this is what I'm doing, and hire up a team and a company and everything else, you have to be 100% on board personally for it, thick and thin.
Yeah, echo what Jon said is you're not committing to a technical thing that you're doing. That's not what building a company is. It's a much bigger thing. You better feel committed to, like Jon said, the product, the customers, the industry, the culture around that, and everything around it. And also on the personal side, don't underestimate the impact it has on your personal life. You better clear your decks and be ready for a commitment on the level of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big part of your life.
Any other words of wisdom for founders?
You can do it. I mean, I hate to say like the whole, I don't want to go into the whole negative, you must commit, and this is horrible, it's really hard. It's been very rewarding. I have a wife and a young daughter, and it's all, I somehow manage to make it work, and I feel really happy that I'm able to make it work, and my wife is incredibly supportive of this, and I'm having a great time. And so you definitely can do it. You just got to be sure that's what you want to do. But once you're sure, do it. Don't be afraid, and don't wait for someone else's permission to create this thing that's in your head. I think a lot of people are capable of, they have great ideas, they have a great vision, but they somehow think that they need permission or someone to bless their idea. Just go out and do it.
Yeah, I can think of very few things that give you that level of satisfaction of, building on your own accomplishments and getting that level of enjoyment out of it. But it's, you get out of what you put into it.
So at some point you made the decision to join Lemnos, to join a group of hardware entrepreneurs going on a voyage. What was your thought process going into it, and what would you tell to people, both good and bad, like, what did you gain, and how do you think about, regardless of where you're going to go, who you work with?
Yeah, well, actually, I don't know if you know this, but I stalked Lemnos before we even pitched you guys.
I gotta go look back at the notes. Wait a minute now.
Look at the webcams.
Yeah. So you actually, I was living near you and you moved in. I was like, wait, that's a hardware incubator, and I was sort of in the process of launching this company and trying to figure out whether to go the venture funded route at all or try to bootstrap or whatever else. And I had a friend, Jeff McAlvey at Temple Automation, who was friendly with some Lemnos people. And he's like, hey, I got invited to this Lemnos happy hour party. It might have even been like your warehouse warming party when you first moved into where you are now, the Forge. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come along. And so I literally just showed up at the party, just was hanging out, mingling people, trying to figure out who were the founders versus the other people who were friends of Lemnos, and we kind of just peeked around and looked at different things, and kind of tried to get a sense of what the place was like. And I don't know if I met any of the partners at that party or not, but definitely talked to some of the other Lemnos founders who kind of just was like, oh, what do you like about being here? What's great here? And so I kind of got a little bit of inside knowledge before we decided to actually come here and pitch.
When you were here, what were you, what was the biggest thing you think you took away from like being with another group of hardware entrepreneurs?
I think there's two. One is just that network effect. Of having people around you that just help move you forward, right? You see the pace of the companies around you kind of set a pace for how fast you're going to move, right? And that's great. And then there's just the simple thing of, hey, does anybody know blah, 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 fill in the blanks. And you put that on the wire and you get an answer in 8 seconds and then you move forward. That just greases the wheels for things moving real fast. And the other, I think speaks to the program here, was just having that outside voice chiming in periodically at checkpoints on certain aspects of whether it's business development or product design or whatever we're doing, just making sure that we're checking the boxes on where we need to be and those touch points invaluable, keeping us on track.
Yeah, I was saying it sounds like you echo it, that the hardware community is, it makes big products, but we're a small group. And it's always just about who you know and serendipitous connections. It's someone has the answer to everything, but no one of us has the answers to everything. And it's just, try to network, interact with folks. Hardware people are generally very friendly, but really that networking is so important for those of you in the audience that might be considering it. Is, again, you might not know the answer, someone does, and if you know them, then you probably get the answer. So you work hard all day, you work 26 hours in a day. And I'm going to ask you about your 27th hour, which is sort of when you go home. How do you the weight of running a hardware company, you got customers, you've got employees, all these things that you carry on your shoulders as a founder. When you go home, is there something you do, like is there a great TV series you watch, or are you into books? What is it that helps you sort of unplug, and what is the role of balance, or how do you think of balance relative to the fact that you may be married and you're married? How do you find balance with all of that?
Yeah, so my wife and I just had a baby, so we have an adorable 2-month-old. So that's my favorite gadget right now. Is wake up in the morning, pick her up. She like recognizes my face, gives this huge smile, and she gets all excited and bats her arms and legs around. Better
than AI and ML combined.
Yeah, you should see how fast she's learning. So that I think is I try to keep home life separate from work life. There's times I have to check email. I'm always doing random emails in bed and things, but I really do try to turn that off. And aside from that, we cook meals with my wife. We go out. We take our baby out a lot. She's relatively well tolerant of that. Reading books. I think with politics being a little depressing these days, I've been a big fan of Ian Banks' Culture series, a very utopian sci-fi.
I always ask the question: if you're reading a book, is it fiction or nonfiction? And can you read, as a founder, can you read a lot of nonfiction and either absorb it or not be stressed by it, as opposed to fiction? Do you need almost a little bit of the like an escape route, little?
Equal doses for me.
Okay.
Yeah, both fiction, nonfiction. My escape is both my loving wife, extremely supportive. I'm celebrating my 25th wedding anniversary this year. I just gave away my age. She was with me very early in my career when I went through 5 startups. She knew what that was like. And then a long period of very stable, and then back again. And I only did this with her full support. So she knows what I go through, and when I go home, she gives me exactly what I need. And she's that voice that helps bring me down in the evening, and she's great. My personal private thing is jazz. I love to play jazz and listen to jazz. So that's my thing.
Gotcha. If folks want to learn more about your company and what you're doing, where would you direct them?
Our website, seriforge.com, and always reach out and email us. We'd be happy to talk with them.
Excellent. So we'll include the email information on all the wrappers for the podcast. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Into the Forge. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me via the email address podcast@lemnos.vc. That's LEMNOS.vc. For our next episode, I'm excited to interview the founder of Flybricks, the product that literally makes Legos fly through the air. My son and I love this product. And for older episodes, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or listen to episodes on the lemnos.vc website.